Teak. Hello and welcome to episode 302 of the Midweek podcast of First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. Welcome.
That's a lot of episodes.
Yes, we kind of missed that opportunity to celebrate, didn't we?
We did.
302 episodes today, and we're still at this thing.
We have more episodes than the United States is years old.
Well, that's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Yep, that's a lot.
But as you know, I always appreciate your perspective.
Our podcast is as old as older than the United States. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that.
I don't remember what year we started podcasting.
2000, no, I don't know.
Yeah. So
about 300 episodes, about 150 weeks ago.
Yeah, sure.
Two a week.
Well, this is our second podcast during Lent, and we have our since we met last for podcasting, we've had our Ash Wednesday service.
Right.
Had some folks come out for that on a night that was still a little bit icy.
Yep, it was cold.
And then,
well, it was warm in the building. It was cold outside.
It's been toasty in the building.
Yep.
So that's been nice. And then Sunday we started the first Sunday of Lent. You started in your Bible study or youth Bible studies.
Right.
Some of the studies y'all been doing. What were we all Sunday?
We talked about the first covenant made with Noah.
Okay. I keep forgetting it's your Old Testament on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, Sunday morning is Old Testament. Wednesday night is New Testament. So then this Wednesday night we'll actually look at the passage we looked at Sunday in worship, the temptation, baptism temptation of Jesus, out of Mark.
Mark also?
Because we use lectionary passages also.
Well, I've got more to look into on that and how they sequence that because there's not a lot to tell just from Mark's version of it.
No, there's not. Not at all. It
kind of leaves a lot open for further study, I suppose.
There are some really cool parts, which I'm pretty sure no one's going to watch this part, but it talks about the heaven was torn open and the Spirit descends as a dove. And I think it was N.T. Wright in one of his deals I was reading talks about how that word is like ripped apart and that God is on the loose and cannot be contained. And that's bad news for the kingdom of the world, that God's kingdom is coming and that rip won't be put back together. It stays ripped. And I was like, that's a cool image.
Yeah,
that makes that descent of a dove-like figure look a lot different.
Yes, it does. Well, this Sunday, I guess, so are we did you lost some Sundays due to weather? Is that why you're behind?
No, we're not behind.
Okay.
We just didn't have the winds, though. We do the Old Testament passage from lectionary on Sunday and the New Testament on Wednesday. And so the first Wednesday of Lent is actually Ash Wednesday, where we don't have youth because we all meet together.
Okay.
So no, that's what it is.
Well, good deal. I know we've talked a good bit about that, and that it's something that we do spend a lot of time visiting about, thinking through. This morning had the opportunity in staff meeting to start talking about Resurrection Sunday and our schedule for that and maybe some programming elements. So we are looking down the road and looking forward to that. Sunday was another indication that things were coming back around as far as attendance and folks returning. Good news for our county that our COVID numbers are lower
really
than they have been in a long, long time.
Yeah. Long time. That's exciting.
So that is good news. And then one of the things that we've added this year to our sequence of this Lent experience is the noon prayer on Fridays.
Yeah, we had our first one a couple days ago.
Yeah, one of the things that we had talked about with doing that was not only giving people opportunity to come to a place to pray on Friday, but because we know that a lot of people during the season of Lent, they will fast on Fridays or they will not eat meat on Fridays. And so fitting with a lot of themes that go along with this season, we decided to do this noon prayer. And we set things up a little different.
Yeah, I thought the whole setting of the worship center and how the different elements we had was really cool. And I got to talk to 3 of the people that were there, and afterwards, just kind of reflecting on it, and all of them really enjoyed and appreciated it. So that's good.
We've talked more and more this last, the last 6 months anyway, about some of the things that we can do in our worship that kind of stimulate our thought, or even if it's just from the perspective of our eyes, our visual and Sunday was really a good example of that, because what we talked about in our plan is to reinforce on Sunday what the experience is on Friday.
Right.
Not what it is, but we want to make people aware through our Sunday worship what's going on. Yeah. So the setup was pretty much the same. We didn't set up communion, but
we had the visual of communion out there.
But we did have the visual. That's right. And we have added some elements of prayer, and we've been talking a good bit about that. And that's an exciting thing that we've kind of gotten into. I think the best is yet to come, obviously, on most ministries.
We've definitely, I guess over this current year, prayer will be an emphasis, that we're taking it seriously, that it's not just something where you say it anymore and that it's facilitated by having that one prayer meeting, but this is actually about having prayer groups who pray intentionally for a lot of stuff,
right?
For God to move.
Well, and it's one of those things where it's not one of those ideas that's coming strictly from a staff or leadership perspective, but it's coming from different areas. And I think one of the things is we really kind of were able to work through some of the intent of a church that prays, is that one of the things that I think in our culture that has been hurtful to us is that a lot of that news and those prayer requests aren't shared quickly enough.
Right.
And then there's have to wait another week for an update a lot of times, just because of the way that we communicate with a lot of the personal prayer requests. So we did launch a prayer group online, and you can find that on our Facebook page, First Baptist Sweetwater. There's a group button there for an online prayer group, and we'll be jumping into that. I did say Sunday that it's somewhat experimental, because we've talked about it from the church's perspective and privacy and administering it and all those things. And so you got to set up with the page or with the group, and now we'll kind of begin to get into that and see how that develops.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's not going to be staff driven, because it's going to be much more up to date, and so it's going to rely on the members to be the ones who engage there, which is the beauty of groups, that you've got better engagement, more personal engagement, because you can make those private groups, and as opposed to our Facebook page is kind of like our front porch, and so it shows a lot about the church, but the groups are where that interaction happens, so you definitely want to join those groups. Yeah,
and one of the things that happens a lot of times in church life is that it's our business, as I say ours, mine and yours, the staff, the leadership, to think about these things, to evaluate these things, and to structure stuff. And a lot of times I know that people don't quite understand the full reason behind everything, but it's just one of those things. It's really come of age, I guess, in terms of culture. And when you step back and really look at it, there is a lot greater value in doing something like this, I think.
I mean, there's greater value for us as a staff. I mean, I think you mentioned it Sunday, the old days, and I say the old days, like just when I first started in ministry, the hospitals would call and tell your church, hey, you've got this member in the hospital, they're in this room, unless they specifically ask you not to. That was just a courtesy they did. They'd call the churches, and so you knew who was in there. Nowadays, privacy issues, as well there should be, they can't do that. And I remember even when I first got here to Sweetwater, we had I can't remember if it was a whiteboard or a chalkboard on the wall, and people would write names and the hospital room number in the office.
Right.
And whether you liked it or not, it was there. And that's changed, and that is for the good. But this will help communicate those needs, and because we talked about how we've even had times where people had surgery and we never were told about it, so we didn't know.
Yeah, we did not know until
you want to be able to pray for those. You want to be able to minister to them, and Well,
and we have so many people that are concerned. We are concerned about one another,
right?
And if you're not in the whatever communication chain spits out that information, then you're left out. You don't know, and that includes me and you.
Yep.
Or the church office.
And the assumption is that somebody's called, and when you assume that somebody's called, nobody's called.
Right. And so hopefully this will at least give us something, one place to rally around
Right.
with greater detail and updates. I think that's the thing that I noticed is in terms of when you looked at the weaknesses of a weekly prayer meeting, it was that you didn't have updates except for every week. And that's the only place you could really elaborate.
And you only had updates from the people who were there.
Right. So if it was one of those things where you missed a week or you're in leadership on the third floor, you don't know what's going on in terms of some of in the lives of some of the folks. And so a lot more there that we want to develop and learn about, but especially thankful for all of this kind of coming to the front of our experience during this season.
Right.
I think that's really important for us to remember, to celebrate, to pay attention to. And I think the other thing, the conversations, and of course this is only Tuesday that we're recording, but already the conversations that I've had with folks from Sunday until today, we're beginning to anticipate things for our church and in the life of our church. And it's more than just recovering from a pandemic or recovering from these ice storms. It's really getting about the business that we feel like God has called us to here.
Right. I think that's the exciting part, is that this idea of the prayer ministry specifically, it wasn't just something, like it is something that we started talking about as a staff, but it's just kind of grown by leaps and bounds where other people are coming to us and saying, hey, we believe that this is where God's leading us, and it's all fitting together in the form of prayer. Right. And so the women's team comes and says, hey, we want to create this intergenerational prayer partner ministry. And you're like, okay, that's a really cool idea. Flesh it out. And that fits with what we're talking about with prayer groups. And I'd told Heather Cosby that I was doing a Bible plan by Andy Stanley called Visioneering. And I was reading it, and one of the days, Andy Stanley talks about these ladies who came together and wanted to start a prayer ministry. They wanted to intergenerational, and that they had these ideas. And, you know, a lot of times when people come to you, they tell you, this is my idea for a ministry, take it and run with it. And they want us to do it. But just like in that story, Heather took it and she ran with it. She's done it and facilitated it. And it's so cool that she's talking about that. I'm reading this Bible plan that says that Andy Stanley's church had done the same thing. I sent it to her and she's like, that's amazing. I was like, yeah, it is.
Well, one of the guys that I listen to, and we've used his book a lot, is Mark Batterson. And one of his messages recently, they own a coffee shop,
right? And
so I've kind of resonated with his story and what they do in their ministry, National Community Church in Washington, D.C. His office is on the second floor of this coffee shop, and so during pandemic, as a matter of prayer and getting together, they had a prayer meeting in the upper Zoom.
That's cool.
And so a play on words there, but they initiated this during COVID, and it's turned into quite a thing in terms of them discerning vision and God's purposes for them. And I think that's what it comes back to, is that church can become very, I mean, it's always going to be important, but it can become very mechanical.
Right.
And there are always going to be things to celebrate as a part of that meeting together, seeing God work. But then there's that next level, that place where I think God is leading us, where we're starting to understand the presence of God better as it relates to us and our future.
Right.
And it starts to come from people who are a part of the church, rather than just those who are staff leaders.
Right.
And so
I think with anything like this, it's going to stretch, which is great. And I think in their prayer, we probably need the most stretching, because we've talked about, you've said it from the pulpit, that a lot of time our prayers focus on health and rain. And so those are the things we pray about. But there's so much more to prayer than just those two things. Right. And you talked about that with praying big prayers and vision of what God could do one day when we don't have debt and things like that. There's more to prayer than just those two things, but it's so easy to slip into those because they're very visual and specific things right then and there. But there's so much more of that prayer conversation.
Right.
And it'll stretch us.
And I think one of the things to encourage us moving forward is, I would say, find find someone that you feel comfortable praying with on a regular basis. I think that's going to be important as we start to discover this. And then the other is, if it's not an individual, at least have a group that you pray with.
Right.
And I think we'll see in the days ahead for us some prayer groups start to form, and then we can coordinate that so that we have an idea of when these groups, who's kind of leading these groups, and then where they're meeting and what time they're meeting, and really start to see something, putting prayer at the forefront of the ministry of this church.
Right.
And it's one of those things. I'm thinking too that it may be one that has this is the time for this, because we've initiated similar things during my tenure, but there's a different spirit to it now altogether, and so it's something that's really exciting. You'll hear more about it on Sunday, and then we'll keep talking about it in here on our podcast and other times, but I'd love to invite you into that conversation. Our worship is Sunday at 10:30, so if we don't see you here online, we look forward to seeing you in our worship center.
See you then.